All right. All right, we have here on the show Chris Okamoto, and I'm very excited to speak with him. He's from Orange County, which is where I'm originally from as well. And he's been spearing up there for like about 20 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's about right. Went by pretty fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, can you share a little bit about how you got started and a little bit of your background?
Sure. I grew up kind of probably like a lot of spearfishing guys did doing rod and reel. I started out maybe when I was about, I don't know, I can remember when I was about 4 years old fishing for trout with my folks. And then in junior high, I got into kind of bass fishing and fishing for bluegill and things like that. In high school, I started working at a fishing tackle shop. And then from there, when I was in college, the first time I went was just basically a three prong down in Baja, and we were shooting mullet and small bass and things like that. And even then, I didn't get into it until I started working down at the aquarium. And one of my buddies, Mako Fukua, he kind of got into it before I did. And I'd see him catch fish or shoot fish, and I didn't think I would ever be able to do it. And then I went out with him a couple times. And first time I didn't really get into it. The second time I was hooked. I think I shot like a bunch of sheephead and a couple calico bass, and I just couldn't get enough of it after that. I just kept going as much as I could. And luckily for me, my job is in San Pedro, so I was really close to the whole ocean area from San Pedro all the way to Redondo. And that's where I kind of cut my teeth into spearfishing.
Okay, so do you live in Orange County or are you more from the LA area?
Well, I was born in like the Torrance Gardena area, and then I moved to Orange County. Gosh, maybe I don't know, maybe about 15 years ago or so, and I've been there ever since.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. And so your current job, you said you work at the aquarium. So which aquarium you work at? Like, what's your current job?
So the aquarium I work at is a real small one that a lot of people might not know about. It's in the Los Angeles area. It's actually in San Pedro. It's called Cabrillo Marine Aquarium. It's aquarium that's much smaller than like the aquarium of the Pacific. Our specialty is kind of like hands-on learning. We specialize in Southern California, so all of our tanks, or I should say, most of our tanks, are cold water temperate systems, and so our fish aren't real flashy. But we have a lot of the local species that a lot of the spearfishing guys would hunt. And my particular job area, I'm an aquarist. So it's kind of weird. When I started out at the aquarium, I was a part timer and I worked in the programs division. So that means I would run the slideshows and do the touch tank and talk to the general public. And then from there, I moved on to the outreach division where I would go to different schools and teach marine biology off-site. And I actually ran that position for about 13 years before moving into the aquarist position that I am now. And the aquarist position, it's kind of like my dream job. I get to collect all the different specimens that we have at the aquarium, and we build the tanks and maintain the water quality and everything else. But for me, the best part about it is I also get to fabricate equipment. So I build all of the traps, I build all of the nets. I run a lot of the stuff that's on the boat, and I build things that we might need on the boat too. So it's a lot of fun. When people ask me what my day's like, almost every day is a little different. And for me, who has a very short attention span, that works out perfect.
I, I feel like most of us that spearfish are kind of similar. That's why we keep like going at it because it's like constant stimulation and you never know what's the next, like no time in the water is the same. So that's what kind of keeps us hooked,
Oh
you know?
yeah, definitely. Like one of the things I love rod and reel fishing, and I still go to take my son. But when you're outside and you're holding a rod, you only get to see what's happening on the top. You might see a fish boil if you're lucky. If you have Polaroid, you might see a little bit underneath. But man, when you're free diving, you get to see it all. And if you're quiet, I mean, some of the experiences that we've all had are just phenomenal. You can't match that to anything outside of the water.
What is like one of your top, let's say top experiences, ever? Or
Yeah.
let's say top three. Let's go over your top three because I think there's a couple of them I want to ask you about later on. But
Well, I mean, I was thinking about this the other day, like, because now it's white sea bass season. I remember one time I was hunting at Catalina Island, and this was back when Catalina used to have a lot of kelp on the front side. And I was diving one spot, wasn't seeing anything. And then on my way back to my boat, I saw a big school of sea bass. And to this day, it's the biggest school I've seen. There was at least 100 fish in that school. And they were probably, I don't know, 30 to 50 pounds or so. So I was kind of behind the kelp and I saw a really nice one. I lined up and right behind it was an even bigger one. And I pulled the rookie mistake and swung the gun and spooked the whole school. And all of them took off, but they were heading towards another area of the island. They weren't just cruising. They were really hauling butt. They were moving fast. So I was like, oh, I bet they're going to the next kelp bed. So I jumped in my boat, ran over to the next kelp bed, dropped in and started running transects up and down it. And sure enough, like 15 minutes later, the school breezed by again. And this time, instead of being greedy, I picked the closest one and I shot like a 45 pounder or something that day. So, I mean, just seeing those fish light up like that was phenomenal. And I'd say that was one of the things that I remember about spearfishing. Um, Another great event was when the bluefin first started showing up in Southern California. It was probably the second year that they were actually guys were starting to shoot them. And I was on my boat, which is my boat is small. I have a 16-foot radon craft Bahia. It's kind of like it's got the radon hull, and
Yep.
we took it all the way out 40 miles offshore. And I was with my buddy Jeff Barr that day, and we saw the tuna like just puddling on the surface. So he went after him and couldn't close the gap. And then when it was my turn, I just remember, I'm on the surface looking down in the water, and you just see these ghostly shapes start breezing by. And I kicked
Yep.
down to them like 30 feet or so. And then it was just amazing just seeing those big Volkswagens just blowing by like that. And I took a shot and lucked out, and I got a 220 that time. Put it on. I mean, to get that on a 16-foot boat was incredible. We took pretty much all of our strength to drag it over the side and then put it up in the bow and then drive it back to San Diego. I mean, it was just that's a story that I'll be telling my kid for the rest of my life. I'm sure he's going to get tired of hearing it.
Oh yeah, that's the beauty of I want to be the cool grandpa, Like
Yeah.
I remember that my first moment too getting vortexed, and it was like out of a National Geographic, and I was just so thankful, and when I got done I was like, and oh by the way I missed, but I got done. And the rest of that day, I was sitting there just thinking about it, like where how fortunate we are. We see things that only people like dream of or see on, planet Earth, or that show Planet Earth, or my, Blue Planet, or whatever it is. It's just awesome that we get to experience all of that.
Oh yeah, there's not too many people in the world that could say they've seen a school of bluefin, especially big bluefin. Now we're talking, these fish are going upwards of 300 plus, blow by like that. I'm really hoping they come again this year, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, yeah. So, any more experiences you want to talk about, or that's
I mean, we could talk. We could talk all day on
yeah,
just
no.
different
Well,
things.
no, and that's fine because actually wanted to ask you, with you being in aquarium, being Aquarius, and working in that field, that industry, how do you think that's like helped you spearfish?
Um, it's a little bit different because most of the times when I collect out at the aquarium, I'm on scuba, but there are times when I get to collect on free diving too, when there's certain species that we'll go after. But I would say more as I guess a marine biologist, you kind of notice things a little bit more than maybe the average person might on their first time. So when I'm diving for different fish, I can't say I guarantee this because I don't know anybody who I've really talked to that in depth about what's different between what I see and what they see. But I see things differently as far as bait, like the way the bait schools up sometimes,
Yep.
current, and especially habitat. I think a lot of it is sometimes when I'm really lucky, it's just I might have a little bit better understanding of what kind of habitat a certain fish might have.
No, that's awesome. That's kind of one of the things I was really interested in talking to you specifically about because I have another friend who's a biologist, and he was very instrumental in this new area I was diving to like explain to me what every fish does, what its habits are, and all this stuff like that. And it was like definitely, I don't want to say like got a leg up, but he understood the big picture of everything, you know. Um,
Yeah, there's definitely other things that we might.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me, Brett? I'm
Okay, I
sorry.
got you. I got you. No, that's fine. We'll just edit that. It's fine. Um, okay, so the next question I have for you, um, Anybody that can tell when they visit your Instagram account, which is, by the way, if you want to say that right now.
Oh, it's just under Oak Power, OAKPWR.
Yeah, you seem to
And
favorite
there's
the white.
there's another one that we actually run. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, no, no. That's all right.
You just seem to favorite the white sea bass, the ghost. Is that true? Like, is that your favorite fish to hunt?
I wouldn't say it's my favorite. It's probably the most challenging, and it's one that I definitely do enjoy during the kind of the springtime. It's one of those. All the guys that hunt sea bass real seriously, I would say it's more of a love-hate relationship because when you get one, it's phenomenal. That other 90% of the time when you're hunting that cold, dirty water, it's not so much fun. It's one of the fish I enjoy hunting for sure.
Okay, yeah. I very much have a love-hate relationship with that fish as well. Um, so, question, do you have any particular gear that you like, a setup that you really prefer when you're going after sea bass, or any tactics or anything that you kind of look to, like a formula? Like I have my little formula that I try to share with people, but that you feel is pretty proven, so to speak.
Well, like I guess the first question you have is on gear wise, what I normally
Right.
go. So there's pretty much only two situations that I'm hunting sea bass, which is probably the same with everybody else. Is it's either off going on a shore dive or on a boat dive. And if I'm going on the shore dive and it's a kind of a gnarlier swell where I know I'm going to get beat on the rocks, I typically will carry a lighter uh, custom wood gun, like a 55 inch three band gun. And then if I'm diving off a boat, my very favorite sea bass gun, and this is a gun that I've been using for years. It's a 59 inch. There's a guy named Gil Gacula who passed away a few years ago, and he built
Yep.
me this gun called the SoCal Tracker. And that gun, it's an enclosed track, 59 inch. I have either a stainless addiction or Maury shaft, and always a slip tip on it. I only hunt sea bass with slip tips on them, and that one's a 5/16 inch shaft. And I only hunt with most of the time when I'm hunting for sea bass, it's almost always a float line. And my favorite float line that I'll normally use will be about, I don't know, 125 to 130 foot. Dark Waters built my last one, and it has an integrated bungee on front. And on the back, it's really cool because the Dyneema inside will kind of change colors towards the end. So you can tell when you're running out of line. But I like float lines better than reels just because in my early days when I was hunting, I got spooled a couple times on big sea bass on a reel, and that just kind of freaked me out. With the float line, I'm usually able to put a little more pressure on them, and just everybody does it different, but for me, that's what I prefer.
So with your float line, do
Um,
you put a
and
carrot
then
float on it? Do you put a carrot float on your float line?
sometimes, yeah, sometimes. Most of the time, I don't. Phil Herendon just sent me one of his the fiberglass ones he makes, the really small egg ones. That's really nice, and that one cuts through the kelp a lot better. So I've been experimenting with that one on shore dives, and I haven't shot any big sea bass this season, so I won't know how well that works until the very end. But the idea of being able to know when you're running towards the end of your line when you see that float is definitely going to be helpful. Otherwise, when I'm towing my other float lines, no, I just look for that color change at the end usually.
Okay, nice, nice. Yeah, I like that Dark Waters. Yeah, shout out to them. Their products seem kind of next level as far as like you're talking about those little attention to detail with the line changing colors and the integrated bungee and all of that. So yeah, Matt's doing a real good job with that stuff.
Yeah, I was really happy with mine. One of the ones that he built me, he was asking me on colors, and I was like, well, I kind of like blue because I was looking for something that shows up well inside the kelp line. And he built me one kind of like a blue green. And at first, I was thinking, oh, it's not bright enough. But when I was actually taking it out in the water, it is perfect. It looks different. So if somebody's driving by it, it doesn't look like anything that would look like kelp at all. It looks like something different, and that's good because I want people to not run me over if they're going through the kelp
Uh,
beds, which is why I
uh,
wanted a bright.
oh,
And then,
absolutely.
oh, go ahead, Brett.
No, please go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, and then you're asking about techniques. I don't really have any like. super secret techniques, except for what I always tell people when they're asking me, like, especially if they're just starting out, I always tell them go slow. I think a lot of guys that are sea bass hunting um, are kicking through the kelp just too fast. For me, it's if I'm on a good dive and it's like a minute and a half underwater, when I'm on top, the other thing that I always tell people is get a watch, because you will be surprised how short you're cutting your dives on your breathe up intervals. So if I'm down a minute and a half, I like to be out of the water for a good, 2.5 to 3 minutes to breathe up. And that way I'm well rested. So my next dive is also going to be a pretty decent long one. When I was diving, I remember Dam told me this. He said, my buddy Dam Wynn, he told me, hey, your intervals are just too short. And he was correct. I was probably, in my mind, I thought I was resting like a minute and a half, and it was more like 45 seconds. So by getting a good dive watch, that helped me tremendously. So like I said, I like to have a long interval when I'm breathing up. I think that allows the area that I'm diving, the kelp beds, to quiet down a little bit. Less likely to spook the fish, because you know how white sea bass are, man. If you make any kind of noise, they're gone. Bubble comes out of your snorkel, you burp one out of your suit, your fins click. If they're nearby, they're usually gone. So I try to be as quiet as possible and move as slow as possible. And when I'm running through a kelp bed, I will usually start on pretty much everybody does this. Start on the upcurrent edge. I usually will swim kind of the edge of the bed and then cut back in the middle and just zigzag until I've covered most of the bed and then head out. A lot of times guys ask me about the croaking sounds. I've shot fish that were in beds that were croaking, and I've shot fish that were just no sounds at all. In fact, sometimes the best sea bass beds are the ones that are completely dead, and I'll be diving in there and thinking, man, this place is just, it's like a desert. There's nothing in here, no calicos, no bait fish or anything. And sure enough, the biggest sea bass are sometimes there too. So that's why I say I don't have any great techniques to share with anybody. It's just you got to put your time in the water, I think, and have a good circle of friends who are also spending that time in the water, so you kind of know when the fish are around. That helps out tremendously too.
Yeah, that's my biggest thing is time in the water, and then also with white sea bass, they're either there or they're not.
Yeah.
So yeah, timing is everything.
Yeah, that is definitely true. I mean, a lot of times guys say, "Oh yeah, they're only there on the high tide," or, but there's been many times when I've shot fish on a low tide, on a minus tide, between the tides. It's just, I don't think anybody really knows when they're in there for whatever reason. They're in there on their own time whenever they want to go. It could be on any tide, any time of day. I mean, I've missed it many times. Like, one of the other things is that I tell people is sea bass do variety of croaks. I don't think it's just one croak. There's one croak that you hear most people talk about, where it's like a high, it'll go whoop, and then it drops down and goes boop, boop, and then there'll be a pause, and then it'll start again. That's one of the croaks I think the males use to attract the females. But I hear other different kinds of croaks too. There's one that we call the motorboat croaking that sounds just like an outboard engine purring at kind of a lower speed. And when I hear that one, and if it's loud, it usually means there's a big school nearby. And there's been a couple of times where, just due to time constraints, I had to bail out of the bed and get home. And my friends were there, and they were like, "Hey, you missed it." Like a half hour later, the whole bed was filled with sea bass. And I was like, man, I patrolled that bed for 2 solid hours. I didn't see not even the sign of a fish. So it's like you said, they come in when they want to, and they're either there or they're not. And unfortunately, most times they're not. They're out in the deep sand channels doing their thing, or some other place too.
Yes, it's so true. It's like you said, it's a love-hate relationship.
Definitely.
But I always like I prefer actually now sea bass hunting. At least you're spending your time in a kelp bed, diving, and you're kind of seeing that environment. When you go for tuna, it's the most frustrating thing sometimes, where it's like whack-a-mole, and you don't see anything other than blue water all day long. Or
Yeah.
maybe the occasional tuna screaming by. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And the tuna, a lot of the guys that don't dive the tuna, like, they think that it's so easy, where, oh yeah, so and so jumped over the side and shot a 275 pounder or whatever. Man, there's days where we do, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 jumps in the water, and you're kicking as hard as you can to get either to keep up with them, to get in front of them, to drop down on them, and never get a shot off. It is incredibly frustrating. And then sometimes it's, it's easy. You hop off the boat and all of a sudden they're just doing the vortex right around you. It's just, it is a very hard style of hunting. And I don't think a lot of people realize that about tuna. They think it's that easy, and it really isn't. The guys that are really good, like, Balta and Blummer and those guys, they know, they have a little bit of more of a science on how to dive on them, and they connect a lot more than we do. But for the average guy, it's not that easy.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's so frustrating, and it's like, you have that. It seems like there's that week throughout the summer where all of a sudden it's like you could get, they are just docile, or for whatever reason, you can just jump in and swim right up to a 200 pounder and plug it in the face. And then for the rest
Yeah.
of the time, you can't even get near them. Yeah, it's just a kind of an
Yeah.
odd thing. Um, so we talked about the sea bass thing, but you said you like, you like going out to Catalina. You're diving out there obviously quite a bit, and I'm sure you're quite famous in our little circle of friends with your shark footage from the summer. Do you want to tell us about that?
Oh yeah. So like when you're asking me what my favorite fish to hunt, it's probably yellowtail. I mean, I love hunting yellowtail. You get to see big schools. It's not that uncommon to see them. You have to kind of fool them sometimes. And I love yellowtail hunting, but the whole white shark thing, and I don't know if you knew that it happened twice to me. It wasn't just once.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, we were down at Ship Rock, and I was with my buddy Jamie Pumford on his boat, and we were diving for yellowtail. The current was screaming, and I told him as soon as we, dropped the hook, I was like, "Hey, man, there's going to be yellowtail here. The current looks right. The bait was stacked up right." So we jumped in and we kicked out to the point area of the current. And even before I could make the first drop, I saw three really nice yellowtail in the 30-pound class. And then I breathed up and made the drop and started looking. And then I remember vividly, I looked back to check the boat to make sure that we had a good anchorage. And I saw his boat, and then I saw a fin out of the water, and I turned my head, and you could see that on that video that I recorded, where I look at it, I turn, and then I turn back at it. When I turned the first time, I thought it was a mola mola because I had seen a mola there maybe a week before. So I thought about it just for that quick second. I was like, that wasn't a mola fin. And I looked back again, and sure enough, man, you saw the dorsal fin, the top fin, and then the caudal fin, the tail fin cutting the water. And right away, my heart sank. And I immediately ducked my head in the water. And unfortunately, the camera didn't catch it. But the first pass that fish made was just a gritty image. It was, the water wasn't that clear. It was unreal to see that thing blow by. So I got out of the water, and as I was getting out, some other guys were getting ready to drop the hook on the other side of us. And I told them, "Don't go in the water, man. That was a big white shark." So we sat on the boat. We were on that boat, and the other part that people don't know is we sat on that boat probably 45 minutes waiting, and we were debating what to do. And the only reason we stayed there that long is a sea lion came, and it was just fooling around in the water, just not concerned at all. So I'm watching it. I'm like, "Oh, that shark is gone. There's no way that sea lion's going to be playing around like that." So foolishly, we jumped back in the water and kicked back towards the point. And I think on my second drop, and you'll see that in the video, I'm looking one way, and then all of a sudden the thing came right up on my right side, and I just shipped my head over and I saw it, and it made a pass within 3 feet of me and it just blew by. And then after that, we pretty much got out of the water and we moved, and that was just a very scary experience. That shark, I always tell people too, was not trying to kill me. It was just a little bit curious to see what we were, because if it wanted me, it could have easily taken me on the second pass when it came up. It just wanted to see what I was. Um, the other time that happened was a year later at Farnsworth Bank. And I was with my buddy Eric Stewart, and that time we're on my boat. We were diving for yellowtail, same thing. Current's going good. I told him, "Hey, man, there's going to be yellowtail here." On my way out, I saw three nice yellowtail, getting ready to make drops. Breathe up, drop down, and probably like the third drop, I'm hanging at 25 feet of water, just checking the bait and everything else. And just right below me, the shark showed up. That was a smaller one. I think that one was 12 foot. The one at Shiprock was bigger. That was a 14 footer. The smaller one came up vertically at me, which you'll see in the video. It's just coming straight vertical, which is right away. I'm like, I'm gonna get bit. It's gonna bite me right in my side because I'm kind of laying horizontal, and it came up, and I swung my gun at it, and that one turned. And it turned, and then I kicked to the boat, and I didn't know it kind of at the beginning until I watched the video later. But that shark tracked us all the way back to the boat. It was swimming parallel, maybe 12 feet out from me, but the water was a little bit murky. You'll see it in the film, but I didn't really see it when we were swimming back. That one was gnarly because of the way it came. It was coming up at me, and when I watched that film, I always tell people that I think if I had panicked on either one of those sharks and I just bolted for the surface, I have a feeling it would have triggered some kind of feeding response, because the second shark was definitely heading right towards me. And I think the only reason he turned is, I swung the gun at him, and he wasn't in attack mode either. He was in a curious mode, but he was in a more curious mode than the Shiprock shark. The Shiprock shark was just cruising by, took a look. This one looked like he was, more interested in what I was until I swung the gun at him. And like I said, I always tell, people are like, well, weren't you scared? Well, yeah, I was scared, but at least I didn't panic. If I had panicked, it could have been a different story. So since then, I bought a shark shield. It's that electrified whip that hangs off your leg. And I'll let you know how that works, because this season, come June, when yellowtail season comes around, I'll be wearing that when I dive.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about that too, as far as white sharks, and so many theories out there. And for me, I have my own theories, my own experiences with sharks, and it's like, and even surfing, too. I feel like visibility saves your life sometimes, when there's no viz and you've got a giant animal coming full bore. And even like you said, if it's an inquisitive look, you're still getting bit, or it might be an inquisitive bite. But when they're coming and closing the distance like that, if it's like 5 feet of viz when you're hunting for white sea bass or something, that shark is pretty much committed at that point. And I think, like in your situation, when you're out at Farnsworth, which is super sharky anyways, but when you're out at Farnsworth and you're down there, and that shark's, like you said, it's coming because it's obviously vertical, inquisitive, like hunt mode, and it backed off. And then there's the other side, like where you're saying you didn't panic, right? I mean, that's true for terrestrial and marine animals, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think anything could be put in attack mode if you act like prey.
Yeah.
It is not a favorable thing. The thing that a lot of people ask me about white sharks, like how come there's so many and everything, the general thought is probably because of the gill net ban. Back in the 80s, or late 80s, I should say, when they stopped doing local or close to near shore gill netting, it allowed a lot of fish to flourish. Like white sea bass are, way better white sea bass hunting now than there was back then. But those gill nets probably killed a lot of the baby white sharks. And now you see it all over the news. Those baby white sharks are all over the place at the beaches in Southern California, and they're growing up. And they're growing up, and they normally patrol seal rookeries in different spots, but each island can only hold a certain amount of big animals like that for feeding wise. And Chris Lowe, one of his talks, he talked about, I think it was at Guadalupe, where the white sharks were actually showing aggression to each other. The bigger ones were chasing off those smaller ones. So the smaller ones have to find other spots to settle out at. And at Catalina, my guess is, and I have no data at all to back this up, but my guess is there's probably 3 sharks at any given time at Catalina Island during the summer. And I just, that's my rough guess. And the only reason I have that rough guess too is a lot of times the guys that are fishing, they'll be fishing around the entire island and they'll see 2 different sharks. And for them to see the same shark twice, it's not going to happen if you're looking at a very, far distant from one end of the island to the other. I think those are all different hunting territories for some of those smaller white sharks. And when I say smaller, they're not, the baby 3 or 4 footers. They're like probably 12 foot and up, 12 to 15s is my guess.
Right. They just switched over to hunting mammals from fish pretty much around that size, right?
Yeah, about 10. They think usually around 10 to 11 feet, I think, is when they go from fish to mammals. And even the sharks that are bigger will still hunt some of the bigger fish, I think. But yeah, they're definitely eating mammals from 12 foot on up. And that's why we get bit. And you're talking about the dirty water thing. That's 100%. It's just, mistaken identity. When you're sitting on a surfboard and you have that big giant silhouette, it kind of looks like a big fat, like elephant seal, the way the board is cut out, the way your arms kind of stick out of the side. And sharks aren't that smart. They just think that's food, and that's why they hit us. But in murky water, that one of the things that changed my life is after the second time the shark breezed us at Catalina Island, I won't hunt yellowtail in dirty water anymore. It's just not worth it to me. So last year the water was dirty at Catalina almost the entire year. I don't think I did more than 2 dives at Catalina Island, and I wouldn't dive unless it was 25 foot or better. This.
It's funny you say that because I don't feel like so much of a coward now because that's my rule of thumb too. It's not fun to know that you're breaking rules, and for me, and you too. I mean, it's not really about us anymore. We have a family and all of that, and it's just not fun to have that in my mind. So I prefer to hunt, in pretty good, clear water and enjoy myself rather than have my heart rate through the roof the whole time because you never know what's around the next corner.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of one of the unfortunate things about spearfishing is that those white sharks, like I said, they're finding new places to hang out, and the little ones are growing up to be big ones, and they're starting to be more common. So my guess is the shark attacks around Southern California. Actually, I shouldn't say southern, around California, from Southern California all the way up to the Red Triangle area, Northern Cali, are going to be pretty hot spots. So whereas we used to have, I think it used to be one fatal attack every 10 years or something like that. I think that's going to increase pretty tremendously. The guys that were up at doing the research up in the Farallon Islands area on the seal rookeries and stuff, they said that the amount of seals that had been attacked up there and were showing wounds were, I think, more than like 20% or something like that. It was a huge number increase, whatever it was they had talked about. And if they're biting seals and sea lions, there's a decent chance that we could get bit too. So just have to be more careful about everything.
Yeah, and it's the thing that I always kind of find wild is with all the research now and the data, and I'm like addicted to following that shark tracker app and seeing the patterns. I mean, I used to train dolphins and sea lions as a contractor for the military, so and just in my life growing up, I've always been attracted, kind of like intrigued by animals, right? Like that's why we do have the stuff we do. And animal behavior. So it's so interesting to me to see like there are patterns with these sharks, and like, okay, in October they're going to come back and they're going to be around here, or summer, here they come, and they follow the food just like every other animal. So it's I kind of pay more attention to that stuff now just to be more risk adverse.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's to me, it always seems like if we're going to get hit on white sharks, I always think for some reason it'll be closer to the fall or maybe earlier spring when the water's cooler. It doesn't seem like they like a lot of really, really hot water. I mean, they show up in Hawaii and places like that too, but for whatever reason, it just seems like they're more aggressive when the water's a little bit cooler. And that's one of the reasons why I won't hunt yellowtail in the middle of winter. Yellowtail around, I mean, the home guard's around all year round. You could shoot them at Catalina and other places, but you're not going to catch me diving in cold green water during the wintertime. That's just statistically not something that I would find that rewarding. And you're talking about being nervous and stuff like that too. Yeah, it would make me nervous. And I also, when I hunt, I don't want to give off a nervous vibe. That's how you become prey, I think. If you're just shivering and stuff and not acting right, might be you attract the wrong kind of animals. So I would rather hunt in the summer when I'm um, a little bit more warmed up and when the water is a little bit clearer, hopefully, and I don't have to worry about those things.
No, that's a solid point. You're absolutely right. Like, how many times do we talk about where you get in that super predator mode and like that hardcore vibe just scares all the fish away.
Yeah,
When you don't
yeah,
care. Like when I target practice, sometimes all of a sudden you're like, I saw more fish today, just target practicing, being loud, but not giving that vibe off. And they just kind of come over and they're inquisitive. That happens to me all the time, and like down in the tropics and stuff, where you're practicing that clear water, but you see so many fish, and I swear it's just because you don't care.
yeah. I agree with that 100%.
So like you've been diving for 20 years, correct? Like around 20 years, right?
Somewhere around there, yeah.
So do you have any like long-term goals or like do you have any like benchmarks you kind of want to hit as a spearfisherman, like world records or anything or
Not so much world records. I'm not really a record chaser or anything like that, or not really. I mean, there's small local tournaments that I'll do, like the McNulty Seabass Classic that's going on right now. I'll do that one. But as far as setting any world records, no. I would like to take a advanced freediver class, like a level 2 or something like that, where I could dive deeper and be more comfortable at it. That would definitely be one of my goals. Um, Other than that, no, I can't think of anything. I've been really fortunate in my life. I've been able to, to get a lot of different kinds of fish and some pretty decent sized fish too. Lobsters, it'd be nice to get a big like 10 pounder, but I don't know if I'd want to eat it, something that big either. So I'm not a big bug hunter. I like catching a lot of legal size limits, and that pretty much fulfills my needs for bugs. So other than that, no. I mean, I'd like to hunt bigger yellowtail, like maybe in New Zealand or something someday.
yeah. Oh yeah, that looks fun.
Oh God, man, those kingies, they come in those giant schools like that, and there's some monster fish down there.
I mean, yeah, 100 pounds and things like that. Yeah, insane. Yeah, the lobster thing's funny. I caught like a 13 pounder one time.
Wow.
Yeah, when I was at work. It's kind of funny. And I actually let it go, because I just kind of felt guilty. I'm like, this thing's probably been alive for 70 years and I'm going to eat you. So I actually kind of put him back and hit him in a little spot. Took a picture with him, of course, on an old flippy phone back in the day and then let him go. So you said you travel a lot too. Where have you traveled throughout the world and, for
Oh,
varieties of fish?
I'm not so much for spearfishing. For work, I've had to go to Japan for working at a different aquarium. I was doing presentations there. But spear-wise, the only place I've really spearfished that was not in California has been out in down in Baja. La Paz is one of my favorite places to go, but until my kid gets a little older and we could do a family vacation, I haven't been back since. So I'm kind of eager to go back and shoot amberjack and wahoo and stuff down there.
Yeah, I mean, God, Baja is such a gift for us.
Uh,
You could go, I mean, the beauty thing about that peninsula is that you can have any variety of fish. You just got to know where to go. It's just incredible.
yeah, I mean, water that's warm, diving in warm water is a blessing. And my friends that dive in warm water, like tropic stuff, a lot of times they're like, no, I won't dive in California. The water's too cold. And they're right. When you're in Baja, it is so nice to wear, just a lycra or even like a 3 mil suit. Whereas in the wintertime here, or at least I'm in a 7 mil suit. The difference is so much nicer being in warm water and being more relaxed. So you could do deeper dives and everything else. And the fish there, they're gigantic. I mean, the reef fish there are big. The big yellowtail, big amberjack, big grouper, all kinds of fun stuff down there.
Oh yeah, we went down there this summer a few times, and the first day I think, well, at least the first within 2 days, everybody had their personal best yellowtail, and and we lost some beast of yellowtail, but they're all 40 pounds and bigger,
Oh,
you
wow.
know. Yeah, it was just yeah, it's just a spectacular place. And then you got the big grouper on the Sea Cortez side, or um, yeah, I just feel like that place, it's just the population isn't there to get so much pressure like it is here. So you can go down there and you can still some of those little pockets. There are some little niches down there that have not been touched, and like that's kind of been our thing lately. The last few summers now is really going to push exploration down there and try to figure everything out. It's a special place.
Yeah, that's what one of my buddies, Nate Baker, him and his friends used to go down there all the time, and they would just drag a boat down or a couple skiffs and hit all these different areas. And he said, there are places there that nobody, or I shouldn't say nobody, but see very little pressure from spearfishermen. And he would just take his camera down there and shoot pictures of walls of yellowtail and all kinds of neat stuff down there.
Oh
It's still a
yeah,
great spot to go. Baja's a phenomenal place.
yeah. Then it's like such a simple place too. where you're going down there and it's like, here's the cows, we don't drive at night, and there's all this other stuff. It's just like a little bit of a adventure to us living in the world we live in, and then you go past Ensenada and it's like the Wild West.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot different down there.
Yeah. So you have any future trips you'd like to do in the next few years, or like any dream trips if you could go on a dream trip?
Gosh, if I could go on a dream trip, yeah, it would be probably Australia. I'd like to go to Indo and hunt doggies too, dogtooth tuna, but anywhere tropic that has big fish would definitely be high on my list. Travel wise, we'll just have to see how it pans out with the family vacation, whether or not I can, figure out a place to keep my hyperactive 7-year-old occupied while we
Oh,
go spearfishing.
yeah, I understand that. Has he shown any interest in what you do as far as diving or anything like that?
Oh yeah, he can't wait to hunt fish because he is very much like me. I mean, he looks like me when I was a kid, but the things that he likes are definitely the kinds of things that I like too. So we have a pool in our backyard, and he was swimming in that. Gosh, he was in one of those little baby pools from 2 years old. He learned to swim probably by 4. I think when we were 5, or when he was 5, and we were down in Mexico, he was hitting like the bottom of a 12-foot pool, no problem. So he's got a pretty decent breath hold for a little kid. And I won't take him until he's a really good swimmer. And I told him, and he understands this, that the ocean conditions are a lot different than a pool. He has to be able to swim in rougher water, and I want him to be able to read conditions a lot better before he starts doing that. But I'm sure he'll be shooting little um, kelp bass and reef fish and things like that eventually.
Yeah, I have an 8-year-old at home who's very similar. She's my youngest, and she's just gun ho. And it's like, hey, do you want to go on the boat? Yes, yes. But like you said, I got to throttle them back because they don't understand the
Yeah.
consequences and everything. We'll hit like the jetties and stuff, and she'll just hold on my back, and I'll just swim around, and we won't even shoot anything. I'll just point out all the local fish, so they could start to understand everything.
Yeah, that's my goal is, well, hopefully this whole virus thing clears out by the end of the summer, and then I'll be able to take him to Catalina. Because I promised him, I said, you're about the right age now where we could strap a life jacket on him or a PFD and take him into the water, and he'll be able to see stuff firsthand. He's really excited to do that. So I'm hoping by the end of the summer we'll be ready for that.
That's such a blessing. I mean, honestly, to be able to share. I mean, that's kind of the cool thing about. I feel like what we do too is that we get to pass that on, that joy for the love of the ocean, and just not just the ocean, but the nature in itself, to the kids, and the kids love it. It's
Yeah,
just a great thing.
yeah. My kid, his favorite thing is to come down to my aquarium. Like we had Disneyland passes and Knott's passes and stuff, and I'll be like, well, what do you want to do? And he goes, yeah, I want to go down to your work. I'm like, oh man, that's like a 50-mile drive from my house, and I've been there all week, but we'll still go down there. We'll go down to the aquarium and fool around in the tide pools and look at rocks and things like that. He's really into fossils, so we've been able to find some fossil whale stuff in the rocks there. And then he's always asking me. We had those baby black sea bass, the giant sea bass that we raised, and he's like, "Oh, I want to see those." And he's been seeing them kind of grow up. So he is really into the ocean. He's really into those kind of things to see.
Let's talk about that because you just recently did a project, right? Where you were releasing black sea bass.
Yeah, yeah. So that was a project. It was actually a conglomerate of a bunch of institutions. It was the permit was under Dr. Larry Allen, so he's at Cal State Northridge. Southern California Marine Institute in Terminal Island had his large fish. He had 3 giant sea bass that were in a holding pen, and he was basically just recording sounds from them. But they were there for a long enough period that they got used to that tank. So it used to be that nobody ever thought that giant sea bass would spawn in a shallow tank, shallower than like 20 or 30 feet or 40 feet. I can't remember what the data is, but they were said to do some kind of um, like a swimming pattern when they would release the eggs and the sperm. So they never thought it would happen in the small tank. And the first one aquarium that was ever able to raise them was Long Beach Aquarium. In fact, in their tank, they have, I don't know if they have 3 or 2, but they definitely had a pair that were spawning. And about I want to say 3 years ago, they raised a single baby to a juvenile stage. And that was a big, big deal. Nobody had ever done that before. And the way that this thing all happened is I had contacted Nate Jarls, who's one of their curators at Long Beach, because one of our volunteers at the aquarium is a very good friend of my family. He's an artist. His name is Kubo. He draws larval fish. That's his thing. And he always told me, hey, can we get larval black sea bass or giant sea bass so I could draw them? And I'm like, man, that's a long shot. So I contacted Nate. Nate said, hey, if we ever get any babies, we'll let you know. Sure enough, Southern California Marine Institute, Larry Allen's fish had some eggs, had a lot of eggs. And Nate put us in contact with one of the aquarists at Long Beach named Nicole. And Nicole told us, go ahead and come down and we'll split up some of the eggs. So Long Beach took a bunch of eggs. We took eggs. We didn't really know how to raise them beyond what Long Beach had done in the past. And there's a special tank that you use called a chrysal. It's a kind that you raise jellyfish in, basically. And they said, well, you can try to raise them in there. And we did, and they did okay. But what we found out is we started tweaking a lot of things. And one of the biggies that I won't bore you with, it's nutrition. So the nutrition of the larval fish is super critical. You have to give them a special kind of like fatty acid at certain dates. And we kind of cracked the code on that by modeling some other kinds of fish. And long story short, we were able to get, I think at one time we had 1,200 baby giant sea bass settle out from larvae to where they are not in a chrysal tank anymore, where they're actually settling towards the bottom of the tank and swimming on their own. And that was undone. Nobody had ever done that before. Now, of course, not all of those survive. They're going to start to peter out as they grow. But what we ended up with was about 400, I don't know, maybe 2 to 3 inch long giant sea bass. And I always tell my friends, come down to the aquarium, because we had them on display. And I was like, this is the only time in the history of our planet that anybody has ever seen that many giant sea bass babies in one spot in one time. It's just never been done. It was such a monumental event. So we had those babies. We kept 200 of them. We gave the other 200 to the Aquarium of the Pacific to hold, because we're lucky. At our aquarium, we have what's called an aquatic nursery. And it's an area where we're able to raise larval fish because we have the staff for it. AOP doesn't really have a dedicated staff to raise larval fish. It was just Nicole was the one who was taking care of them there. So I think they got 3 to settle, but we had hundreds. So they were able to take half of them from us to kind of take care of them. And then we were going to release them on separate dates. So ours was the first release, and that was, I don't know, the second week of March. So we released a little under, I think, 200 of the larval fish in a I can't tell you where. It was in kind of like a classified location, but we had seen baby giant sea bass before, and it was amazing. I've got footage of that, and we should be showing that at the aquarium pretty soon. And you'll see this cage that I built where we lowered it real slowly with it was myself, another one of our staff divers, Daryl Dulesky, and a photographer named Mike Kofer. And Mike was the one who had actually photographed lots and lots of baby black sea bass in this particular location. So he knew that they were going to be okay being released there, so they would be going off doing their thing. So we released them, and they all came out of the cage, and it was, you want to talk about a National Geographic moment, that the lid of that cage comes off to the side. I was shooting video, so I backed off, and you see our other diver, Daryl, he kind of tilts the cage, and you just see a cloud of baby giant sea bass swimming out of that cage onto the sand, and it was cool. So like you asked me, like if there's anything that I see different about fish than a normal person is, I can tell you one thing is I know when a fish is hungry, because I've raised so many different fish at the aquarium. I'm feeding fish all the time. When those fish came out of the cage, they were already hungry. You could look at them, their fins are erect, they're kind of moving around. And black sea bass, I'm sure you've seen this, a lot of times when they're inquisitive, you'll see them turn sideways on you. Like you swim next to them, they swim sideways and look at you with almost like they're looking at one eye. And I've got video of that during the release where one of the babies, like a 3-inch one, he cruised up right next to me and he just kind of turned sideways and is looking at me. His fins are all erect. When I hit the surface, I told my coworkers, I'm like, these fish are 100% ready to feed. I would not doubt if I had some krill or some small mysid shrimp, if I had dropped them, they would have ate them right there on the spot. In fact, Mike said when he was following them, he saw them kind of picking up stuff on the bottom as they swam away. I mean, it was just an incredible story. Now, the other part to that story that we don't know is nobody knows what happens to those black sea bass from the time that they're you see them in like sandy areas. Like we'll see them in certain sandy reefy areas when they're about, I don't know, about 3 inches to about 6 inches. Then they disappear, and then as divers, free divers put in more time in the water than I think a lot of areas where we're going to see fish because we're quieter. I don't know anybody who's seen giant sea bass inside kelp forest that's like 12 inches. I've seen them maybe 2 feet or so, but I haven't seen them 12 inches. So nobody really knows what happens to those fish from the 3 inch size to like, that 2 foot size. We don't know if they're going to rocky reefs. I think my personal guess and some of our team's guess is that they might be settling out in deeper water, like in about 200 feet of water where there's small reefs or something where they're starting to pick up small larval fish as they grow. And then eventually they migrate back into the kelp forest where we see them. But it's one of those things where we don't know. So luckily at the aquarium, we still have, I think we have 15 or so fish that Chris Lowe's lab at Cal State Long Beach is eventually going to tag them when they get larger with acoustical tags and release them so we could find out what happens to these fish during that size class. We don't know where they go. And for me, just curiosity wise, I want to have it.
All right, hello.
Yeah, can you hear me, Brett?
Yeah, I just lost you for like a second. You said for
Okay.
you, curiosity wise.
Oh yeah, for me, it's just I just want to see what happens to them. I just don't know where they go. Nobody really knows.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you actually, because you know, so many. I feel like I guess biologists in general, like, and we as fishermen or spear fishermen, right? We're always like, there seems to be a vibe where it's like we don't trust science and we don't trust because we've seen it. We don't trust like the, Cal State fishing game or whatever it is. And it's such a unique relationship, kind of having seen both ends of the spectrum where, um, you know what? There is a lot of political crap that goes on because science is usually funded by, the political aspect, the states and the federal government. So if there's no problem, then there's not going to be any funding. So, yeah, and so I feel like people are always we need to they're all with the especially with the protected areas and things like that. I feel like a lot of the biologists that I've dealt with and friends of mine through my old job and stuff like that, they would be 100% on board with us as spear fishermen and what we see because I feel like we see so much more than just a regular biologist who's doing fish counts at the ramp. Um, and we'd have so much to offer. I feel like if we actually like, I don't want to say for lack of better terms, join forces with them, or at least had a voice where we could communicate and work with them, because I feel like we all want the same thing. However, there seems to be like this line sometimes. The more people I talk to, it's like they don't either trust the science or they feel like you hear so much negativity about they close this, then they close that. And I feel like I'm kind of one of the few that's like, well, good. I don't mind if they close it, but I just would like some communication on what is the plan moving forward. Are we going to like open it up in 5 years and then close this area? Because if making the environment which I'm going to be hunting in better, and it needs to be some places where I hunt, it's like a ghost town, then I'm all for it and I'll go hunt somewhere else. But it seems like it's nice to have people like you in the industry and doing what you do to be able to I feel like you're a very powerful voice because you see both ends of the spectrum. Like you bridge that gap. Do you understand what I'm saying about that?
Sure,
Or
sure. I mean, there's this. It's one of those things where you're saying it's a hot topic, and it is. Fishermen don't like to lose access areas, and when the whole MPA thing came through, it was rough on fishermen. It was rough on everybody, especially for me. A lot of areas that I dive in Palos Verdes were shut off, and that cut down my diving tremendously. Like Point Vicente, which was a fishing access that kind of taxpayers paid for, got shut down, and that was one of the safest entries I could do. But at the same time, so my take is if people, when they ask me, what do you think? I'm like, I am 100% on board that there's certain areas should be shut down and there should be certain size limits on certain fish. Because otherwise, you keep shooting all the little ones and people keep harvesting them and fishing them and netting them, you're not going to have any fish. So they have to have some kind of intervention. I would only wish that they had kind of moved it to areas that were pressured, but not were easier access for fishermen, because there's a lot of places where guys can't go, or now they're hiking down, areas that are steeper, and there's more chance that somebody's going to fall and get hurt. They should have left some of the areas, I think, open that would have been accessible for certain guys to be able to hunt, or certain people to hunt, I should say, and fish. And it's just shutting down those areas that were easier for us to get to. I really wish they had moved it up the coast a little bit further somewhere else. But when you're asking about the necessity, yeah, there had to be something done on certain things. When they did the whole kelp bass size limit thing, I heard a lot of guys, oh, that's terrible, blah, blah, blah. And I do understand from the fishing perspective, if you own a fishing boat, you have to catch fish for guys to climb on your boat to pay, to pay to go. But at the same time, we were fishing for sand bass and stuff during the spawn and taking, 10 fish a piece. And I think that's what decimated the sand bass bite when they were, usually it was in the summer, twilight trips. I used to go on them all the time, and we would catch a ton of sand bass. And it's like, now you can only catch half of them, 5. For me, 5 fish is a lot of fish. If they're over 15 inches long, that's a lot of fish. And I'm still happy that they kind of did that one. I think the size limit for kelp bass and sand bass and things like that was a good thing to do.
No, it's funny you say like 5 fish, right? And it's like, for me, it's the experience of the whole thing, right? And I do like to eat fish. However, if I run out of fish, I can just go out and get more. It gives me an excuse to go dive.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to load up with 400 pounds of fish and then I'm not going to dive for the rest of the year, because I'm still going to dive.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's one of the other bonus things about being a spear fisherman is, and a lot of people don't understand this. And I try to explain this to people when I run into them, because when you're coming out of the water with a spear gun, it's very intimidating for somebody who isn't a spear fisherman. First off, they always think it's loaded. And I always tell them, no, it's not loaded. Don't worry. The bands aren't cocked. You don't have to worry about them. But the other thing I tell them is, a lot of people think, well, you kill fish all the time. Da, da, da. No, that's untrue. I mean, the time that we're in the water, when we come out of the water, I'd say 90% of the time we don't have anything. So we're spearfishing guys, we're real selective on what we shoot, and as it should be. We have a target that we're hunting, like a sea bass during the season. When it's just one sea bass per day, that's all you take is just one fish. And that fish will last you a long time. It's not like we're out there blasting, thousands of fish at a time. You're taking one fish. It's a selected, fishing kind of thing, and it's sustainable. Even Fish and Game years ago said that nobody can survive on just spearfishing your whole life, because you'll starve to death. It's just not gonna happen. So when we spearfish, I always tell people, we get to see all kinds of cool stuff. The ocean is loaded with life. We're not taking all that life. We're taking one fish, one breath at a time, and it's very selective. Think about it. There's no bycatch. We're not dragging a net through the water, killing thousands of little small, larval fish and things like that. We're taking one fish at a time. And to me, it's kind of a very ethical way to go.
No, that's a solid point. I mean, yeah, I talk about it all the time. Like, I literally just go out, shoot one fish, and I'm good. If that doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, But yeah, even when you go offshore and then you see the commercial tuna boats with helicopters and planes and all that, and you're trying to get one fish that day or two, for the max. But I mean, literally, to be honest, one fish for the whole boat if I can. And then you see them scoop up like a mile of tuna, and you're like, well, that's not cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
one of the things when a lot of environmentalists come down on people, and they're like, you guys shouldn't be doing this. Da, 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 da. A lot of times when I talk to people and the argument gets heated, I'll ask them, like, you ever eat sushi? Well, yeah, I eat sushi. You buy it at a restaurant? Yeah, I buy it at a restaurant. How did they get that fish? Did they catch one fish and that was it for the whole restaurant? For you? No, that came from a net boat probably, and there was a lot of tuna that they killed. It's not like I'm killing 100,000 tuna. If I'm lucky, I'll get one a year. It's a big difference. It's not a big wasteful thing. So a lot of times that quiets people down. They don't really, I think a lot of people don't understand where their food actually comes from. But spearfishermen know where they come from, because we harvest them, we bleed them and usually prepare them ourselves. I know I do. So And I want to pass that on to my kid too. I want him to understand that we're taking a valued resource and we're doing it very selectively.
Yeah, and respectfully, like when I kill a fish, it's like, knowing all the time and everything it put in to get that thing, and then,
Yeah.
you take its life, you bleed it, there's a little bit of respect you have. Like you said, you know where your food's coming from, and something had to die, and that's not, I don't take that lightly as much, but I mean, I respect it, where my food came from, because of what it took.
Yeah, and I mean the other bonus of on the flip side of being a spear fisherman is you will get the freshest fish that available. I mean the stuff that we get, especially when we prepare it, bleeding it right there in the water, gutting
Oh
it.
yeah.
Usually we'll gut it right there in the water, put it on ice, get home, fillet it out, cut all the red blood out of it and everything else. I mean that quality is always good. When the first bluefin that I got, when I prepped it, I gave it to Kubo, the guy who I was telling you about, our staff artist that was doing all the drawings, and he said, "Man, that was some of the best tuna he's ever had." He grew up in Japan and everything. He said that was the best prepared that he's ever had. And I said, "It's just the way that we did it. I mean, I had iced it down and made sure that it was bled, and that meat never got very warm at all. So the quality was phenomenal. And everybody that I shared that fish with said the same thing. They said that, wow, this tuna is unbelievable. And that's one of the things I always tell them, as a spear fisherman, we're really lucky. We get the freshest fish possible. And if you know how to take care of it and prepare it, that's a bonus.
And it's crazy is too is like you said, when you actually have fish that's fresh like that, you realize you've been eating crap forever, and you realize how good like that fish really is, where it doesn't taste acidic or anything like that.
Yeah, I rarely buy fish at a restaurant. Anytime I go there, it'll be beef or something else and when I get it, fish tacos are different. Fish tacos are really good at restaurants, but other fish, I am rarely impressed with it. When I get it, I'm like, wow, I'm so sad that I ordered this instead of the ribeye or something else. It's just
Oh,
not the same.
yeah, 100%. I have my little code too, where I'm like, I'm never going to order bluefin at a restaurant. If I want a bluefin, I'm going to go get a bluefin. It's just my little thing that I'm going to try to do to make a difference, whatever. But because of that too, when you eat it, it's like, oh, I've had better. Oh, it's in my refrigerator. Like, why did I pay for this? Other than to support local fishermen too. But I mean,
Yeah.
that's it. Well, Chris, I don't want to keep you. I know it's getting late, and I just really want to appreciate you taking the time to meet up with me and talk. And maybe you ever come down to San Diego, I'll take you out diving. It was a pleasure to meet you, and I'd love to pick your brain more about the science of things when we meet up or something like that. So,
Yeah, I mean, anytime, Brett. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. But anytime you want to talk to me, just let me know.
oh, no problem. I will. Thanks. I appreciate it, man.
All right. Take
All
care.
right. Cool.